As word of Alpha Phi Alpha's founding at Cornell reached other college campuses, a desire ignited to join in this remarkable endeavor. Traveling home from the Christmas holiday of 1907, Eugene Kinkle Jones and Nathaniel Allison Murray stopped in Washington, D.C. to establish a second Alpha chapter at Howard University. On December 20th, 19 young men were inducted into Alpha Phi Alpha's Beta chapter. 10 days later, Jones conducted a similar ceremony at Virginia Union College in Richmond, creating the fraternity's Gamma chapter. He recalled that these days ended with every man proud that he belonged to an organization of noble purpose and fraternalism.
I often like to say that it was Jones who spread the gospel of Alpha. He had caught fire of the Alpha spirit because, you know, in order for Alpha to grow, it had to expand. You know, and he took the idea and the concepts and the precepts of this very young organization within a matter of months after his initiation and began to plant seeds at other college campuses. And of course, those seeds germinated, and today we have over 700 college chapters, 700 chapters, college and alumni throughout the United States.
With the fraternity's expansion, the need for a national meeting emerged. In December 1908, Alpha Phi Alpha held its first general convention on the 4th floor of the main building of Howard University campus.
And there the first general convention was held, and a constitution and bylaws were drafted, and conditions were set for the expansion of the fraternity.
On the closing day of the convention, the election of Moses Alvin Morrison of Beta Chapter as national president officially transferred control of the fraternity from Cornell University, and Alpha Phi Alpha became the first national intercollegiate fraternity for African American men. Alpha's birth came at a time when violence against African Americans was on the rise in the United States. 4 months before the 1908 convention, a race riot tore apart Springfield, Illinois. This aggression, taking place with bitter irony in the town of Abraham Lincoln's tomb, terrified black communities across the country.
And this really struck a number of people around the country. How could this happen? About 4,000 African Americans are expelled from Springfield, Illinois. They have to leave the town. And so a number of people are struck by this, and this leads to the formation of the NAACP.
In what was known as the Second Niagara Movement, W.E.B. Du Bois called a meeting at Harpers Ferry, West Virginia, where the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People was founded. This group shared many of the objectives of Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity.
Therefore, they tended to support the program, the views and the program of the NAACP more than the so-called patient and long-suffering attitude that Booker T. Washington and his group advocated. So there was a coincidence of feeling and of program and of activity on the part of Alphas on the one hand and the NAACP on the other. Small wonder that the founding fathers of the NAACP found that the Alphas were an organization to their liking, and many of them joined the Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity.
W.E.B. Du Bois himself was among the NAACP founders who became brothers of Alpha Phi Alpha, joining the fraternity in 1909. Alpha Phi Alpha supported other African American organizations emerging in the early decades of the 20th century, including the National Urban League. Alpha Phi Alpha founder Eugene Kinkle Jones became the executive secretary of this organization in 1917, and throughout the National Urban League's nearly 100 years of existence, Alpha men have played a critical role in the organization.
You know, the most humbling part of this is that one of the founders of Alpha Phi Alpha, Eugene Kinkle Jones, was what was then called the executive secretary of the National Urban League, really the president and CEO in the 1920s and in the 1930s. So it's humbling for me, many years later, 80 years later, to have an opportunity to stand on his shoulders as the new president, as the current president and CEO of the National Urban League. And to also note, and I don't think it's a coincidence, that the National Urban League has had 8 leaders in 95 years, and of those 8 leaders, 6 have been members of Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity.
Alpha brothers who have served as chief executive of the National Urban League include Eugene Kinkle Jones, Lester Granger, Channing Tobias, Whitney M. Young Jr., Hugh B. Price, and Mark Morial. The rapid growth of civil rights organizations also fueled Alpha Phi Alpha's development. New chapters formed across the country, and the fraternity soon took an innovative step forward in its evolution.
And early on, there was a desire to continue the bonds of college days in a more formal way, and to bring into the fraternity others who did not have the opportunity for the fraternal experience, either because they did not attend the university where there was a fraternity, or because they chose to delay it for some reason.
In 1911, Alpha Phi Alpha transformed the traditional understanding of a fraternity as an organization only for those in college, with the creation of the first alumni chapter, Alpha Lambda, in Louisville, Kentucky.
At this time, other than the church, what are the outlets for black men? There are very few professional organizations that are in existence at this time. So black men who are professionals, who are college graduates, are able to fellowship within the fraternity in ways that they're not able to fellowship in the larger society. So the fraternity meets that particular need at the graduate level.
With the expansion of undergraduate and alumni chapters, a means of regular communication between the groups became necessary. The solution was the Sphinx magazine, first published in March 1914 with future Alpha General President Raymond W. Cannon as editor. Many early Sphinx editorials addressed the importance of keeping alumni brothers loyal and involved in the fraternity. The Sphinx is the second oldest African-American publication still in existence today. Americans hoped that World War I, the war to end all wars, would establish equality and justice around the globe. Many Alpha men enlisted, convinced that victory in this war would forever change the way Americans viewed equality at home. Alpha's Beta chapter and others at Howard University successfully lobbied the U.S. government to establish a camp for training black military officers. The largest group represented at this camp, located at Fort Des Moines, Iowa, was the 58 Alphas present, and 50 of these men received commissions. Though pleased with their successes, Alpha brothers were frustrated with the segregated military, remaining firmly committed to combat any and all obstacles to African-American progress. America emerged from World War I and entered the 1920s with a roar. The Harlem Renaissance of this era was pivotal in the cultural history of the United States, as African-American artistic achievement gained greater currency. Naturally, Many Alpha brothers participated in this movement. Men such as historian and essayist Charles H. Wesley, the talented writer County Cullen, songwriter Noble Sissel, Opportunity magazine editor Charles Johnson, the multi-talented Paul Robeson, and the legendary Duke Ellington were important figures in the Harlem Renaissance.
One of my Alpha brothers that I absolutely admire is Duke Ellington. Because, remember now, he was the one that opened the door. These were the door openers, if you will. I merely just walked through and received the benefits of many a day of their hard work and labor. But it was, not only were they ambassadors of the music, but they were also the ambassadors of the community.
12th General President Raymond W. Cannon recalled that at the height of the Harlem Renaissance, Alpha was shocked to learn of the dismally low high school graduation rate among African American students. As Alpha believed in the fundamental importance of education for African American progress, the fraternity initiated a Go to High School, Go to College program in 1919.
And they established this program, go to high school, go to college. I mean, get an education, that's the point. Those of you who can go to college, go to college. But most of you can get at least a high school education. You're going to need that if you're going to succeed in this world. And the chapters embraced it as a national program. It was really our first big national program.
We were out telling people, go to high school, go to college. Stay in high school, graduate from high school, and then go to college. We sent members of our different chapters around the country into the high schools of this country to tell the youngsters. We were assembly speakers, and we sent flyers out into the community. We talked with the principals. We want them to go to high school, go to college.
By the end of the 1920s, Alpha Phi Alpha was proud of its accomplishments and had grown from one small chapter at Cornell University to 85 chapters at institutions across the country with over 3,000 members. The fraternity continued to hold national meetings annually in major cities and at black universities around the country. In 1926, General President Raymond W. Cannon chose the eminent historian and Alpha brother Charles Harris Wesley to write a comprehensive history of the fraternity. At the 1929 convention in Atlanta, Wesley presented the first copies of the Alpha Phi Alpha history book. The 294-page volume gave the first account of Alpha's activities from the Jewels at Cornell in 1905 through the fraternity's extensive work of 1928. During this convention, the Alpha brothers made a pilgrimage to the Tuskegee Institute, considered a model African American community, with elementary and high schools, housing, and a bank all on the grounds. The Alpha conventioneers paid tribute at the tomb of Booker T. Washington. Clearly, Alpha had a great appreciation of Washington's contribution to African American development, despite the fraternity's close association with W.E.B. Du Bois. The men of Alpha knew that unity of purpose, regardless of differences in approach, was vital to the success in the struggles that lay ahead. Just as Alpha Phi Alpha sought to expand further, America was hit by the Great Depression. The Depression was hard on the entire country, but especially African Americans.
The black community feels the Depression sooner, and it lasts longer than for the rest of the country, and this certainly affects the fraternity.
In December 1930, the fraternity's executive council reported that 17 chapters were inactive, yet Alpha endured.
The existence of our alumni chapters was one of the things that helped to sustain us as There was some decline in membership on college campuses because of fewer African Americans being able to afford to go to college at that time.
But the men of Alpha persisted in their leadership and service. Their undying commitment was aptly described by Brother Bernard Young, editor of the Sphinx magazine. Any brother who has fraternity spirit and love worthy of the name, we see that old man depression gets a licking from Alpha Phi Alpha. In 1933, the fraternity established the Alpha Phi Alpha Education Foundation. Headed by Brother Rayford W. Logan, the Education Foundation comprised a structure of scholarships and grants for African American students. In addition, they created Foundation Publishing to provide financial support and fellowship for writers addressing African American issues. A young John Hope Franklin was among the first recipients of assistance from Foundation Publishing. Additionally, a committee of public policy was organized to give Alpha a voice for or against national government policies.